Started. My name is Gerald Wilson. I am the Director of Entrepreneurship here at Enterprise Works, and I want to welcome you all to this session. And we're going to be talking about working at a startup. One of the things that we are very familiar with here at Enterprise Works is working with founders who start these ventures and then recruit teams to help them grow these businesses, grow these ideas into growth ventures. However, for the founders, but also perhaps more so for the rest of the team, this is part of our careers, right? You're starting your career, and oftentimes there are discussions about what does it mean to work at a startup, and what kind of impact would that have on your career? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. My background, prior to becoming Director of Entrepreneurship here at Enterprise Works, was to be one of the co-founders and then CTO and then CEO of a University of Illinois spin-out called Autonomic Materials. And as part of that experience, I grew a team and recruited a number of folks to join that team who started their careers working at Autonomic Materials, and I've had the benefit of seeing how that foundation working for our company, what kind of impact that had on their careers that I hope we can tease out of our conversation today. Okay, we have a great panel here with a range of experiences, and so we're going to have a conversation with the panel, but my hope is that when we transition to the Q&A, we'll get the benefit of hearing what's on your minds and what questions do you have about starting your career at a startup and what that means for your career. So we have Josie, Michael, and Amelia joining us today. Josie and Michael are from EarthSense, and Amelia is joining us from Cash Energy. And what I want to do is start, and we'll start with Josie and then move our way down this way, and have the panelists introduce themselves and just talk briefly about their career path to date and essentially the decision to take the opportunity to join the startups that they're a part of. So Josie, why don't we start with you?
So I'm Josie. I've worked at EarthSense for almost 4 years now, and I started as an intern when I was a senior in college. I sent out a bunch of cold emails, and that's how I got a response and ended up getting an internship when I was, back in school. I was really interested in sustainable agriculture and was looking for something that was more meaningful than some of the other experiences that I had at work. And I just thought it was a really neat experience to be able to prototype and try something new to work on agriculture.
I'm Michael. I started working at EarthSense 4 years ago, just before I graduated from computer science at the University of Illinois. I first learned of EarthSense when I was taking the class Intro to Robotics in undergrad, and there was a guest lecturer, Professor Girish Chaudhary at the university, who is our CTO. He talked all about this little company that was making these little robots going around in cornfields and helping us to make better crops, more resilient to drought, climate change, all these things. And it just seemed like a really interesting project to be a part of. So yeah, I joined there as an intern, quickly turned into full-time, and in the years since I've worked on largely computer vision tasks, data analysis tasks, and the last year or so, autonomy. Yeah, so it's been a very interesting ride.
Hi everyone, my name is Amelia. I'm the Director of R&D at Cash Energy. Cash Energy is a long-duration energy storage company. I've been involved with Cash since the beginning of its inception. Arpit, who is our CEO and founder, and I had the same PhD advisor, and that's how I was involved with Cash. I finished my PhD at Profile, and I've been working full-time since then with Cash Energy.
So you're all obviously very accomplished, very capable, and have invested quite a bit into your education and launching your career. In the case of Amulia, getting a PhD. So the discussions I often have, particularly with students who are contemplating career paths at startups, is that somehow working at a startup might be perceived as a detour from the proverbial career ladder, right? What are your thoughts on that? Is there, from your perspective, an opportunity cost of working at a startup? And if so, what is it, and what are your thoughts on it?
I personally think that there's an opportunity cost to not trying to try a bunch of things in the very beginning of your career. I really like working at a startup because I'm very self-guided and there's leadership opportunities very early on because you kind of have to try a bunch of things outside of your comfort zone to help the company survive. So like early 20s is a great time to do something that, maybe you don't have great benefits, but you are willing to learn a lot and try new things for the first time. And I think that that's great for the career and having experience for the future.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I think there's always a risk-reward trade-off kind of in everything that you do. Working at a startup, there's tremendous opportunity to be given significant ownership over difficult tasks. Myself and Josie, we've both had conversations where our bosses come to us and say, hey, can you do this extremely complicated task in 6 weeks? And it's like, all right, let's see how it goes, And it's just a much broader scope, so we get to get experience kind of with the full array of things. So it can be the technical side that we do understand, in my case, software and autonomy, but it can also be some computer hardware, management of interns, projects, other things, traveling around places, and just all the joys of taking robots out into the field and working with them in the real world. So I've definitely gotten the opportunity to just kind of work all over the place just within one role.
Yeah, I agree totally with whatever Josie and Michael have said. There is a lot of opportunity for you to take on leadership role early on, and you get to work on so many different things at the same time, and that kind of broadens your horizon. And also you'll be able to develop more as an individual. You see this tremendous growth within yourself once you start dealing with every single task within a startup. For me, I was not in my early 20s when I joined Cash. I went to grad school and I've done all that. But I think for me it was more like an accelerated path because to be the head of R&D and to be able to lead the technology development at such a fast-growing company is like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me, and I grabbed it with both my hands, and yeah, it's been a great experience so far.
That's fantastic. I think you've all touched on what I, in my experience, have seen as the benefits, really, in terms of accelerating your career growth of being at a startup. Some of the concerns I've heard is that you were typically thrown, really, into these leadership responsibilities without really the benefit of having significant training, like you might have in a larger organization. How did you navigate learning what you needed to learn in order to take on these responsibilities?
That's a really good question. I think that the internet is useful. Your coworker, your coworkers can be a really good resource as well. Professors too. I think that one of the skills you really develop is being able to research and look outside of what's given to you to solve a problem. And that's in many ways. It may be for what you're specifically working on, or it might be company culture related. You learn to advocate for yourself and suggest your opinion and stand up for it. you kind of do learn, trial by fire quite a lot, but I think it's learning, that's how you learn very quickly.
Yeah, a lot of it does just come from experience. A very important thing, I think, is accepting that you're not going to get everything perfectly right the first time. There's going to be mistakes along the way, and that you can ultimately overcome them. It's definitely a big help is asking for advice from others, thinking with others, planning with others. Something that I've come to learn over the years is that one of the most important things to do when starting a project, especially when there's all these unknowns and all these new aspects to it that I don't have much experience with it, planning is really the most important step. And so we have to have discussions, with the whole team where we kind of think through all these possibilities and make sure that we've really thought it through, like what the potential difficulties and opportunities that we have ahead of us are.
So for me, it was slightly different because I was in grad school for 5 odd years, and the pace at which things happen at grad school is like much different to what happens at a startup. So I had to hit on the reset button and to be able to adapt myself to the pace of the startup. A lot of it was learned as I went along. There is a steep learning curve, of course, but I think depending on your team members, like your founder, and trying to get things done as they're meant to be, really helps, having the support from the team.
So I think, this question of opportunity cost, right? It typically comes up within the context of seeing what your peers are doing, So if you're an engineer or a mechanical engineer, maybe you have peers who've gone to work at SpaceX or, the brand name companies. How are you able to sort of stay grounded in the appreciation of the skills that you're developing, the opportunity that your company has, within this context of seeing what others are doing and kind of wondering, you could be somewhere else potentially, that might be perceived as a more stable venture, it's a more recognizable brand, it may have substantially less pressure. How do you weigh the pros and cons? Because having been in and run a startup myself, my experience is that that's a conscious decision that you make, that the mission that you are working on executing towards is worth having a certain level of commitment to the enterprise.
I feel, for me, I like what I do every day. I have worked at larger companies before, and things just moved much more slowly, and I didn't have as much breadth of what I could do, or as much to learn, I guess, or as many learning opportunities, I guess. There's plenty to learn. I think that if I look at what I do every day and I'm having a good time, it's worth it. I also don't think that the prestige of a name is really all that important. We've done really awesome things. Making agricultural robots sounds cool to anybody I tell it to. We just got patents too. I'm not super worried about the prestige issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned SpaceX. We have a coworker, a good friend of mine, who left us a couple years ago to go work at SpaceX. So we always joke that he's our insider agent for getting robots onto Mars. But yeah, I think with working at a startup and having that responsibility and getting to learn like that and work on these cool projects, there's an aspect of that stands on its own. If you've done that stuff and you've worked on the whole system, a whole new thing that didn't exist before, that's real experience that you have. It's something you have, you have a portfolio of interesting things you've worked on that you can always refer to throughout your career. that others will find interesting, even compared to, like a more traditional company. Something that's also, I guess, an important insight. Are we?
Yeah.
Okay. I've had friends who go and work at these bigger companies, more well-known companies, and they make significantly bigger salaries, and then a couple of years down the line, they get laid off. We've all been hearing the news about these things happen. It's not exactly as simple as like, it's a big company, they have a $100 billion market cap, there's no way they're going anywhere. The giants rise and fall all the time. It's definitely something to keep in mind, I think.
So I think in bigger companies, there are already like rules that are laid out for the employees to follow. Like I worked at Amazon for a few months and they have this thing called leadership principles. If you guys are not aware of it, please do check it. They're actually really great. But all the employees, they generally follow those leadership principles. But at a startup, you are like one of the early members, so you are kind of building the brand of the company. So you are the one who is setting those rules. You are building the culture of the company. So that's an opportunity that you generally do not get, and that's something that's really exciting for me. And also, I feel like this is the role where I could like have the most impact on like the world in general, and to be able to like lead from the front to cause these changes. Yeah, I think that's. And also one more thing is, in a bigger company, you are working on a project, like you are one part of the project, so you're mostly by yourself. But I think in a startup, it's kind of cool that you have like this team of 5 or 6 people who have like this similar goal, and you're working towards it non-stop, and that kind of camaraderie is really great. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you've also touched on the idea that it may not be obvious to everyone, but that you have substantially more responsibility earlier on in your career. You put in a position to achieve things like being an inventor on a patent. Amelia has the cool title of being the director of R&D very early in her career. Can you comment on perhaps a few more examples of things that you feel you're getting exposed to, or things you're getting to do that you think it may have taken you a little bit longer into your career in a more bigger organization to get those kinds of exposure?
Yeah, so the last project that I worked on and the one I'm continuing on, most of the engineering on that I would not have touched until maybe a decade into my career. So we hired a consultant that kind of helped guide the process, but like I'm doing all of the mechanical engineering that is the basis of this vehicle that we're making a robot. And I know that if I were like at a very large company, that would be one of our competitors maybe, it would be split between 10 different departments. And even if I were really deep into my career, I would only be touching one part of it. So I think that was a great benefit to having more ownership over the product.
Yeah, I can definitely echo that. There's really something to just being trusted with, that kind of high-level responsibility. I'm currently in probably the most interesting project that I've ever worked on at the company, where a couple of weeks ago, our boss asked me to develop this end-to-end, basically, approach for robots going around in cornfields. The missing piece currently is being able to exit the row and turn around. And they said, can you do it in 6 weeks? And so it's basically, it's just such an interesting opportunity because in a lot of these companies, like she said, it's broken down into all these different stages. There'd be a camera guy, and there'd be a neural network guy, data sets guy, every step of the pipeline all the way up. And it's just so fascinating to be able to kind of work at every level of the stack, basically, from beginning to end, and be primarily responsible for it. There is also, of course, the stress that comes with that, but I think ultimately it is worth it. Tremendous opportunity for those who are interested in that sort of thing.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Josie and Michael have said. You are basically like responsible for the whole technology development, which I wouldn't have dreamed of before. I think just to add to that, you also get to be able to interact with a lot of different types of people because of the role that I'm in, which is something new to me because I get to talk to like people from cement industry or people from material handling industry. So just like the scope of the kind of people you interact with is also like pretty huge.
So I'm going to flip the order a bit because Amolia has had the intellectual lift of going after you guys so far, and just pitch this question to her because it's building on what she just said, and then we'll bring it back in this direction. From my perspective, one of the richest things about working at a startup was getting a front row view on how a company is formed, how a new venture is formed, and how it grows. And that actually gives you a lot of insights into a lot of different career paths that actually that are aligned with that journey, right? So in my case, in addition to working very closely with our board of directors, who are all interested people with interesting backgrounds, primarily venture investors, and doing deals with them and kind of seeing how they thought about it, that gave me a really good view into the venture industry, right? Conceptualize what it might be like to be an investor, or working really closely with our IP attorneys, responding to an office action, working really closely with them and seeing how they took my technical inputs and kind of turned it into a response to the patent agent. And Amolia's talked about getting exposure to multiple different partners, suppliers, other partners across the value chain of what your company does. Is that right from your perspective? Do you feel like you're getting more visibility into adjacent career paths than you might have in a more traditional role?
Yeah, I think definitely you get exposure to different adjacent career paths, but at the same time, it also makes me feel that I'm in the best career path that I could choose for myself. So it kind of gives me a perspective on what I'm getting from my role at Cash versus what could have been, and it also like makes me kind of realize like that I am in the best position that I can be in as an individual. Yeah.
Yeah. Testing. Hello. Okay. For sure. At a small company, especially when you're doing a very complicated system, you have to have people working on multiple different pieces. So we have a lot of departments that are basically just one person. Like there's one electronics guy that we have. Whereas like a bigger company would be a whole department for that, right? And one of the ways to get a good insight on kind of how all of these other things work is just the collaborative planning sessions that go into making a product work, because it needs to satisfy the needs that the electronics person wants. It needs to meet certain mechanical design requirements, weight requirements, and it needs to be able to get the job done fundamentally. And so everyone really needs to chip in to do those things. And through that process, you begin to understand the core questions that people are asking in these other domains. What is it that I need to get ready ahead of time so that they don't have to do a bunch of extra work, or that I don't make their job harder, that sort of thing. And so I think from a professional development perspective, you get the chance to understand how to manage all of these different things, and so it provides its own opportunity for rising as a manager. You get to understand how to work with a larger number of people, even if their particular specialty is not something that you're going to work in a whole lot.
Yeah, I think that one of the best things you can be in a startup is flexible. Not only do I feel as though I've, done the breadth of mechanical engineering at this company, at least in product design, analysis, and testing, and prototyping, all of that. But I talk to customers, and define the problem that we're setting. I talk to suppliers and do manufacturing related work. So you're really exposed to a lot of different things and get to dip your toes into a lot of different things before, you create your product.
I think on the minds of every founder and CEO of a startup is the ability to recruit a really good team, right? And you guys are, very, very exceptional. And so if you were going to talk to the founders who may be joining us, what are the qualities you think make a really good founder for an early stage employee joining a team? So in other words, for a founder to be a leader, they need to have people on the team, they need to have followers, right? So what kind of person are you wanting to follow ultimately?
Back around. I think that it's important for a founder to know what's important. So a lot of times startups don't offer like super great benefits or like the most competitive pay, but you're going to work on something that is really interesting to you or really meaningful. Like our startup in particular is really flexible about days off. Provides lunch, things like this that kind of unite the team a bit and give us leeway when we need it. But as long as we get our work done and are working well as a team, that's what's important. So I think it's like being able to focus on the things that are important to employees and what is important for success rather than nitpicking.
Yeah, I think it's very important for a founder to be able to listen to feedback and to be practical in a certain sense. I think there's some ideas out there about how founders kind of need to believe in their mission no matter what. I think that needs to be tempered with a bit of practicality, and if someone's telling you it's not going to work because of X, Y, Z, you should at least listen to it and think through it and be honest with yourself about whether or not that particular strategy is going to work. And I think that our founders are very good at that. Another very important quality is the ability to stick it out. I heard it said somewhere that starting a company is eating glass and staring into the abyss. So EarthSense has been around for...
That was an Elon Musk code.
So EarthSense has been around for about 8 years now, and we've made a lot of progress, but it's been a long journey. I've been here for half of it, in order to get to this point, and we still have a long way to go, the founders had to have extreme grit, extreme ability to, just handle all the uncertainty and all the fears that come up. And I think that if they didn't have that, they probably would have given up years ago. I think that's what it takes.
So I think one of the important things that is to be found in the founder is to have passion towards the technology and have like a vision and a path to the vision, because that's really important for someone on the team to believe in, yes, this is something that I could invest my time and career in. So that sense of belief between the founder and the team member is extremely important. And also, I think just the ability to be able to push the team members to their best versions is also something that is like a great quality in the founder, because I think when people join a startup, they themselves do not know what they're capable of because it's a new environment for them. So sometimes it's on the founder to be able to realize the potential in those employees and try to push them to be their best. I know it's not something that you can find as someone who is maybe interviewing for a startup, but you can tell from the conversations that you have with the founder that what kind of a founder they are.
Yeah, that's great. So I think the other side to that is you have experiences, your respective experiences coming alongside the founders of your organization. What is the right kind of profile for a good early stage employee at a startup? from your perspective. So if you were going to have someone join your teams now, what would you be working alongside your founder to look for in that individual? Emily, you want to start?
Sure. We don't have any like specific requirements of a profile. I think all we are looking for is people who are passionate about the same things that we are passionate about, and who are willing to like commit fully to the cause of the company. Because yeah, we generally are not an organization that looks at a resume and sees, oh, it's an MIT graduate, so he might be good. I think we are more into like what kind of a character the person brings to the company, because we expect them to be a certain way towards like the technology development. Yeah.
Passion for the company is a very big thing. I think it's very important to have a person who believes in the mission and a person who's willing to stick it out, for a long time with frustrating results or, a very long road ahead of them. In addition to that, I think having self-starters is very helpful. I think something that our bosses have been very good at EarthSense has been hiring people that don't need a lot of micromanagement. You can sort of hire them, and then on day one, you give them a task, a high-level mission, and they can go ahead and do it relatively independently. And I think that's very important.
Yeah, I want to second that. I think that normally when I'm looking to hire somebody in interviewing, I'm looking for like proof of leadership and self-guidance, because a lot of the people here haven't been here for much longer than you, and have a ton on their plate already. So it is really valuable that you can solve a problem on your own without needing a ton of management. I mean, it's good to talk to your team if you need help, but first try to solve on your own is, that's a very valuable skill.
Yeah, that's great. So before I flip it to the audience for their questions, I just kind of want to give each of you an opportunity. Given the conversation we've been having, we've got an audience of founders and potential employees for startup companies. What thoughts would you like to share that perhaps we haven't covered yet that you think might be important for people to know about the opportunity that is represented by working at a startup or small business?
I think that startups can be very stressful and really push you. And it's a really good opportunity to learn. I think that there's like a long leash to explore and guide yourself to learn what you want and make decisions that will impact your team long term. I just think it's really cool to watch a company develop over the years, because, in the 4 years I've been at EarthSense, I've seen it develop. And it's really rewarding to see like how far me and my small team have come.
Yeah, I second all that. I think at the end of the day, we're gonna start with just more fun anyway. You actually, you're stressing together with people. You're celebrating victories. Mourning, I guess, failures if things go wrong. Sometimes things break. But it forms a very tight bond that I think is kind of hard to replicate at a bigger company. So it's a very exciting and enriching aspect of it.
Yeah, I agree with what both of you have said. I think if you are someone who likes to challenge yourself on a daily basis, and if you are someone who wants to work on some cool technology, startup is a great place to be at, because you get to do a lot of things just by yourself. You get to build things on your own. You have more autonomy, and if that's something that you want, then definitely try working on a startup. Yeah.
Fantastic. So to paraphrase someone, if you want to chew glass and stare at the abyss, work at a startup, right? Excellent. All right, what questions do we have? Does anybody have a question? Okay, right here. If you don't mind, tell us your name and then ask the question.
Hi, my name is also Michael, and I had a question on whether you guys would recommend starting at maybe a larger company than transitioning to a startup, or if you guys would recommend just going straight into a startup, or if that depends.
I went to a startup straight out of college, so I don't know the other way around, but I think it's honestly a little bit more of a risky option. That's great to do early on in your career, because if it doesn't pan out, the more steady job is waiting for you. So given the opportunity, it's really fun to take and do when you maybe don't have as much responsibility, if that is the case for you.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. I joined EarthSense as an intern and stayed there. I did one summer at another company. It's hard to say exactly. I think in general in life, it's not as wise to take risks kind of later in life, but younger in life, people give you more chances. There's just more backups. I figure. Yeah, I guess that's what I would say.
I think it's an individual choice. So if you want to be in a challenging role, then startup is the way to go. But because you always have that big job at a bigger company waiting for you, so if you are presented with an opportunity to work at a startup, and if that seems like something that you're really interested in, then you should definitely go for it.
Hi, my name is Justin, and so I have two questions. First question is, so I read this book called The Lean Startup, and in that book they talk about a case study for the company Intuit, and they basically had a team dedicated to basically a team, an innovation team, kind of like a mini startup within the company. And they were able to produce a product that was very successful. Do you think that, have any of you guys had any experience in a bigger company that had a smaller team that had big impact? Because since you guys did talk about how working at a startup can be more meaningful, I was just wondering if any of you guys had any experience in a bigger company that.
So I spent around 5 months at Amazon, so that's my big company experience. I think there are some teams who work on like this big high impact projects within the company, but I think in a startup it's much more evolved than that, because the challenge is kind of like unknown, so you're dealing with a lot of unknowns, and also the impact of the technology, if it works, could be like much higher than like what happens in a bigger company, is what I feel.
So, a couple of you have mentioned a few times that, if you can start at a startup and then, the opportunity of a big company may be waiting for you. I wonder if you can comment on how much of an appreciation you have already about how transferable are the skills that you've developed, right? So can you look at a larger organization and say, okay, with the skills that I've developed, spending time at EarthSense or Cash, I can take these skills into a larger organization, perhaps at an even greater level of responsibility than I would have had I gone straight to that company straight out of college. Like, do you have a tangible sort of perspective on that?
It's a little hard to say, not having been experienced at those places. I do think that the experience that I have is broader and deeper than I would have gotten at a more conventional company. What it comes down to is the ability to communicate that, of course, in the future. But I do think overall that what it comes down to is what can you show people that you've done, what's in your portfolio. Something that I've aspired to do in my own career is to make visualizations of everything that I do. So every algorithm that I've worked on, all the parts of the autonomy stack that I've worked on. There are videos out there on the company YouTube channel, for example, things like that. And so whatever else is waiting, out in the world of bigger companies and all that, there is that portfolio there as a starting conversation at all these places.
Yeah, I think leadership is going to be useful wherever you go. I think when you take pride in your work and are able to learn quickly, it's very transferable to any kind of job that you do. To touch on your question also, one thing in a startup that I would imagine is a little bit different than like Intuit and a small group within a larger company is like one of our benefits is that we own part of the company. So we feel ownership and responsibility over what we do because it has a direct impact on not just the company but our future compensation. So we're pretty incentivized to work really hard on it. So I would imagine that even the incentive structure is a little bit different even within startups.
Did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I think working at Cash has kind of like broadened my knowledge base. So I feel like I could maybe become a patent lawyer someday because I worked on like a couple of patents. So it definitely helps in that way for sure.
Yeah. What other questions do you have? Anybody with any other questions? All right.
I'm Hindu from Fruit Vaccine. I really enjoyed this discussion with the excellent, very applicable and inspiring questions asked by Gerald, and your excellent and very applicable and inspiring answers. My question is, out of all the collection of answers you all gave to the questions, what is your most favorite, what factor do you like the most favorable thing about working in a startup? Your first preference.
I think the most favorite thing that for me is the technology itself. I really believe in the technology and the impact that it can create. So that kind of like motivates me every single day. Like every day I love to like come in and work on it and try to like see it to the end. So yeah, that's the best part.
That's a great response from the director of R&D. All right, Michael.
Yeah, I guess what it comes down to is just how cool the problems are and the solutions and the vision of it. It is something that I wake up in the morning excited to get up to do, and I go to bed at night excited to wake up the next morning and all that, and all that jazz. Yeah, I mean that's what it is. It's just working on everything I ever wanted to.
I really like the team. I think that the team we've built works really well together and is really funny. And when you spend this much time with a small group of people, you tend to either completely not mesh or mesh really well, I think. And you're put into very stressful situations sometimes, and travel and all that. So I think that it's, we all have a vested interest in making this work, and we care about it a lot, and sharing that with the team is a really fun thing to do.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
So, as an aspiring entrepreneur myself, I have a lot of thoughts in my head of whether I should start a startup or if I should work in a startup first. Do you have any advice for aspiring entrepreneurs to in the pursuit of, their dreams. And follow-up question, have you guys thought about, like before joining a startup, did you have an intention of becoming a founder yourselves?
So I think if you already have some ideas that you think could become a startup, then the best thing maybe you could do is to like talk to people and see what is the potential behind your ideas. Like why work for a different startup if you already have a great idea, right? And I did not have any aspirations of being a founder before joining Cash. When I joined grad school, I wanted to become a professor. So that's like quite a career change for me.
Yeah, I would say, so my own experience, I wanted from the start to start my own company one way or another, whether it was going to be immediate or eventually. I did tell myself years ago that EarthSense would be the last company I would ever be an employee of. That's sort of an ambition that I've had. One thing I would say is, I think that it's extremely difficult to start a company. That I've definitely learned. Even working for a startup, as one amongst many, is pretty hard. I myself, I don't know if it would have been a good idea for me to try to start a company. I think some really exceptional people can do that and have done that. And if they have a good business idea, it's a good idea to go ahead and do it. I think if that's not set up, it might be a better idea to go ahead with the startup. But it's the next best thing, working at a startup. You get to see the whole thing unfold. You play an active role, but you're not necessarily, you don't have to make the whole show run. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that being in a startup, you get to like experience some of the business side and see the inner workings without having to bear all of the stress of employing all of the people and making sure it keeps running. I feel like as I have gotten more experience in my career, like in college, I was always involved in leadership in one way or another, but I do think that there is value in gaining some experience first, even if it is like a startup or the normal company. Maybe if your idea is just like really just a hit out of the park, like that works. But I think that there's a lot to learn out of school that even as part of this company, I've like learned some things that, learned them the hard way because I came in with a student mentality and had an idea about how to do things without documentation or whatever. And, failing early kind of hammered it into my head how to do things. And I didn't have to be completely self-guided when I first joined. So I think that there is a lot of value to getting a few years of experience before creating a company completely on your own.
Yeah, I'll just add to that I think being an entrepreneur to a certain extent is a mindset, right? So if you're already thinking about something, I would encourage you to continue to press on with the customer discovery aspect of that and really understand what is the potential of what you're thinking about. And then it's about impact. You can look at, okay, what is the impact having done this customer discovery that I could have through this particular venture relative to what I could learn by riding shotgun on another venture. And then you can make that call. There are some times when, the mission of what you're contemplating intersects so perfectly with the opportunity landscape that you just can't afford to wait, right? And that's where the customer discovery kind of points you in the right direction there. Do we have one final question? I think we have time for one more. Anybody want to take it? No? If not, please join me in thanking this excellent panel. Thank you so much.